Somewhere under the South Island, under a paddock, behind a locked gate, there is supposed to be a bunker, built to hold 300 people, built to outlast the end of the world. The company that says it put it there sits on the other side of the planet, and they say New Zealand is one of their best markets. Because the richest, sharpest, most paranoid people in Silicon Valley have quietly reached the same conclusion. When it all comes apart, the wars, the pandemics, the very artificial intelligence they are building, the safest place on Earth is right here. One of them wanted in so badly, he became a New Zealand citizen after 12 days in the country. 12 days. This is the story of how a handful of billionaires quietly repriced New Zealand, not as a country, but as an insurance policy. And what that tells us about what they think is coming. His name is Peter Thiel. If you don't know the name, you know his fingerprints. He co-founded PayPal. He was the first outside investor in Facebook, $500,000, back in 2004. For a tenth of the company, it turned into more than $1 billion. And he built a company called Palantir, the one that quietly runs data and surveillance software for the CIA, the Pentagon, and police forces around the world. He is not the richest man alive, nowhere near it, but he may be one of the most influential, because Thiel doesn't just bet on the future. He has a very particular theory about where it's heading. And in 2011, that theory led him to a small country at the bottom of the world. Here's the part that made New Zealanders choke on their tea. To become a citizen the normal way, you're meant to have lived here, boots on the ground, for around 1,300 days over 5 years. About 3.5 years. Peter Thiel had spent 12 days, 4 short trips, a fortnight, spread over half a decade. And he got the passport anyway. The minister signed it off under a special clause, for exceptional circumstances of a humanitarian or other nature, the kind of clause written for stateless refugees. In a whole year it's used a few dozen times. Thiel got it while promising, in writing, that he'd carry on living in California. And in his own application, he wrote one line that tells you everything. He said, "I have found no other country that aligns more with my view of the future than New Zealand." Sit with that. Not the country he wanted to live in, the country that aligned with his view of the future. And the whole thing was kept secret for 6 years. New Zealand only found out in 2017, and only because the Ombudsman forced the file into daylight. 145 pages. Without that, we would never have known. Even the minister, who later inherited the job, read the file and said that if it had crossed his desk, he'd have said no. Citizenship, he said, can never be allowed to become just one more commodity to be casually traded. So what did Thiel do with his brand new passport? He bought land. In 2015, a company of his quietly picked up nearly 200 hectares on the shore of Lake Wānaka, some of the most beautiful country we own, for around $13.5 million. And because he was now a citizen, not a foreigner, that purchase skipped the Overseas Investment Office completely, the very watchdog that's supposed to screen foreign buyers of sensitive New Zealand land. A passport earned in 12 days had unlocked the back door. Then he tried to build something on that land, and this is where the legend runs ahead of the facts. So let's be straight. The press called it a Doomsday bunker. What Thiel actually applied to build was a luxury lodge, designed by one of the most famous architects on Earth. Grass roofs blending into the hillside, room for 30 guests, a meditation studio. The council said no, too big, too visible, wrong place, sitting like a scar across an outstanding natural landscape. He appealed, he lost. In 2024, the Environment Court knocked it back for good, and Thiel walked away. It was never built. But Thiel isn't the story. He's the doorway. Because he is one of dozens. And listen to how they talk about it among themselves. Reid Hoffman, the man who founded LinkedIn, put it plainly. More than half of Silicon Valley's billionaires, he reckoned, have what he called apocalypse insurance. And he said, and I quote, "Saying you're buying a house in New Zealand is kind of a wink wink, say no more." A house in New Zealand had become code. Code for, my escape hatch is sorted. Sam Altman, the man who now runs OpenAI, the company that built ChatGPT, told a magazine, years before he was famous, exactly what was in his go bag. "I have guns, gold, potassium iodide, antibiotics, batteries, water, gas masks from the Israeli Defense Force, and a big patch of land in Big Sur I can fly to." And his backup plan, if it ever got truly bad: fly to Peter Thiel's place in New Zealand. And then there's the story that should raise the hair on your neck. A writer named Douglas Rushkoff got paid a small fortune to advise 5 hedge fund billionaires. He thought he was giving a talk. Instead, they had one real question. Not whether it was coming, not even where to hide. Their question was this: how do I maintain authority over my security force after the event? They'd already worked out they would need armed guards for the compound. What they couldn't work out was how to keep the guards loyal once money was worthless. They talked about combination locks on the food supply. They talked about putting disciplinary collars on the guards. Rushkoff told them the only true answer, your best bet is to treat those people well, right now. They didn't like that answer. And it isn't only the billionaires. On one night in November 2016, the night Donald Trump first won, so many Americans went looking for the exit that New Zealand's immigration website nearly fell over. It normally gets a couple of thousand visits a day. That night, it got 56,000. The bolt hole had gone mainstream. So why us? Of all the places on Earth a billionaire could run to, why this thin pair of islands, 8,000 miles from anywhere? Because when you actually run the numbers, New Zealand is frighteningly good at one thing: surviving. Start with food. A researcher sat down and crunched the export figures. New Zealand's dairy exports alone could feed 39 million people. Add the meat and the rest of the protein, and this country produces enough food for something like 50 million, 10 times the number who live here. If global trade stopped tomorrow, most nations would begin to starve. We'd have a milk surplus. There's a bitter irony in that number. We ship so much of it away that plenty of Kiwi families go hungry in a land of plenty. But in a collapse, that same surplus becomes a fortress. Then the power. In 2024, around 85% of our electricity came from renewables. Hydro dams, wind and geothermal steam pulled straight out of the ground. Cut us off from the world's oil, and the lights, mostly, stay on. Then the distance. No land borders, no neighbor within 2,000 kilometers, 10,000 kilometers from every war zone, and every nuclear flashpoint on the map. In a nuclear winter, the models say the southern hemisphere gets off lighter. We are, quite simply, out of the way. And it's not just a hunch. In 2021, a British university ran the study properly, modeling which countries could hold a functioning society together while the rest of the world came apart. Which islands could feed themselves, power themselves, and defend their own borders. Number 1 on Earth was New Zealand. Then stack on the boring things that quietly matter most. One of the least corrupt countries in the world. One of the most peaceful. Top 3. Every single year. English speaking. Stable. Rule of law. Part of the Western Intelligence Club. Put it all together, and you can see exactly what Thiel saw. A warm, green, well-fed, well-run lifeboat, moored at the safest end of a dangerous planet. To the smartest money in the world, New Zealand stopped looking like a country. It started looking like an asset, a hedge. The same way you'd buy gold or hold a Swiss bank account, something that holds its value precisely when everything else stops being worth anything. But before we get too pleased with ourselves, 2 hard truths. First, the bunkers themselves might be half myth. The companies selling them tell a great story. One firm says it's shipped around 10 shelters here, one of them arriving in 19 truckloads through Picton. Another claims a 300-person bunker buried north of Christchurch, millions of dollars each, shooting ranges, surgical beds, the lot. But when a newspaper went looking, really looking, the Queenstown Lakes mayor just laughed. "It makes me laugh," he said, "because I'm not aware of any bunkers." New Zealand Customs had no record. 9 South Island councils had not a single bunker consent between them. A local lawyer called the whole thing what it probably is, a marketing exercise. So maybe the bunkers are real, buried and secret. Or maybe the fantasy of the escape sells far better than the escape ever could. And the second hard truth is the one the salesman never mentioned. A bunker is only as loyal as the guard standing outside it. That was the billionaires' own nightmare, remember? Because if the world truly ends, if the money's worthless and the state is gone, what exactly stops the man you hired with a rifle from simply taking the bunker for himself? And New Zealand is not the sealed fortress it looks like from a boardroom. Since our last oil refinery closed in 2022, we import 100% of our refined fuel, and we hold only about a month of it. A lifeboat that can't make its own diesel is still roped to the very world it's hiding from. Oh, and the same restless geology that gives us all that free geothermal power sits us squarely on the ring of fire. A major alpine fault rupture is rated 75% likely within your grandchildren's lifetimes. Safe from a man-made collapse doesn't mean safe from the ground itself. So the escape hatch is half fantasy. But the buying is very, very real. And this is where it comes home. In 2018, after the Thiel affair, New Zealand slammed the door. We banned foreign buyers from our existing homes to protect ordinary Kiwis from being priced out of their own country. And then, in April 2025, we opened it again. The government rebuilt the Golden Visa, put in $5 million, and you barely have to turn up, as little as 3 weeks in the country. No English required. And for the first time since the ban, you can buy yourself a New Zealand home, as long as it's worth more than $5 million. The response was instant. Applications jumped 5-fold, close to 2,000 wealthy foreigners, nearly $4 billion, lining up for a piece of the lifeboat. And around 40% of them, Americans. One Auckland investor put it perfectly. In all his years, he'd never once had an applicant mention Biden or Obama. Now, he hears about Trump and MAGA over and over. They're not chasing a dream. They're buying a bolt hole. We've already seen what that looks like up close. When an American television star bought a high country station above Lake Wānaka, he ended up in a standoff with New Zealanders over access to their own backyard. One headline read, simply, "He's holding the country to ransom." Now multiply that by 2,000. And here's the timing that ought to sting. At the exact moment we rolled out the red carpet for the world's wealthy, ordinary New Zealand house prices fell to their lowest in years. In Queenstown, a house already costs 11 times what a local family earns. We shut the front door on our own and opened a side door for billionaires. So what do we actually do with all this? It would be easy and lazy to end on, "The rich are coming, be angry." But I want you to look at it from the other end. Because strip away the bunkers, the passports, and the doomsday talk, and what's left is the single greatest compliment this country has ever been paid. The most powerful, best informed, most ruthlessly rational people on the planet, people who can live literally anywhere, looked at the whole world and chose here. Not for the skiing, as the safest place to be when it all goes wrong. That's not their secret, it's ours. And most of us have stopped even noticing it. Here's what they understand, that we've let ourselves forget. They're not buying New Zealand to live in it. They're buying it because it's a real, durable, hard asset. Land, water, food, safety, in a world running short of all four. They are doing, on an enormous scale, the oldest move in the book. When everything feels uncertain, own the real thing. And you, if you own a patch of this country, a house, a share of a farm, even a slice of a fund that quietly holds a piece of it, you already own the exact asset. The billionaires are flying 12,000 kilometers and skipping citizenship queues to get their hands on. You are not locked out of the vault. You are standing inside it. The mistake, the one they're quietly betting you'll make, is to not understand what you're holding. To sell the lifeboat cheap because you needed the cash this year. To hand the family land or the family home to the first offer with enough zeros on it, and then rent your own country back off the person who bought it. That's the real lesson to hand your kids. Not fear. Ownership. Teach them that the ground under their feet, the quiet green safety of this place, is not boring, and it is not worthless. It is the very thing the richest men alive are quietly hoarding. Understand what it's worth before someone else prices it for you. Peter Thiel spent 12 days here, and he saw it clearly. He saw that New Zealand might be the safest, most durable asset on Earth. He just made one mistake. He assumed we'd never work it out for ourselves. Let's not prove him right.